the last time we were here to hear David's poetry was the second or third leg of my spring poetry series that I have every year. And no offense, but I always called David first to see if his schedule worked, and then I rounded up everybody else. It's only because I just wanted to make sure that David was always at every one of my events at some point or other, and he had 3 dates to choose from. And then I offered everything to everybody else. I remember talking to him the last time we were together about this wonderful book, and he was so excited about it. I mean, his eyes were just sparkly, and I know he was in terrible pain from his back, so he would speak in spurts. He'd come over and talk about a little tidbit about it and then go off and sit down or stand up or move around and try and get comfortable, and then come back and say, we're going to do an event, we're going to do this. And I asked him, he said, I don't know whether you realize that I have problems with my back. And he went into some detail, and I said, no, I have not realized that. And I said, well, are you going to be able to do an event? I said, I am happy to do an event with you by Zoom. And I also really knew that David hated Zoom. He hated Zoom. He would take it because we were in the middle of a pandemic. We did an event with him and Eric for the nature book, right? And I thought it was great. David hated being on Zoom. He just realized that you have to be in person to do, readings or poetry or any of that. And I said, you underestimate how much everybody else got out of it. Because we were in a barren desert and you read your great work, and it really just was an opportunity for us to hear something that was uplifting and driven and inspiring and all of that. And it was very true. And he said, no, I'm not going to do this one by Zoom. I'll be here in the store. And I said, great. I didn't get him to sign the other stock that I had of his, and that's my bad, but he was also very uncomfortable. But how happy he was about this particular book was really evident. And so I can hear his voice when I read it, which makes me feel like an imposter. And yet I can hear his voice, whether you can hear his voice or not. And it's going to be odd to hear other people read his work, but I'm really glad that he gets to be spoken out loud. It's astonishing to me how inspired this book is and how I found so many things that I could relate to in it. And it also really blows my mind that there's 2 funeral pieces in it. I wept when I read it, and I wept when I read it the second time, and I wept when I read it the third time, because he must have known somehow, I guess. I just assume either that or we're all mortal and we ought to. You get to my age and you start looking at that end of the tunnel that's a little closer than the beginning of it. So that's kind of an organic process. I'm going to read a couple pieces and then I'm going to pass it off. And then if Barbara comes, she can add in. And then we can just trade off for whoever feels like reading what. I am mildly dyslexic, so if I mispronounce a word or I trip over a line, forgive me in advance. Texture of silence. A lichen-patched boulder is the texture of silence I long to emulate. I want to melt into the landscape, forget the surveyor, and yield to the survey like oats and pines, sparkling schist red sandstone. I yearn to be camouflaged, an unseen sensation like wind on my cheek, or the stream clattering in my ears. And it's the stream chattering in my ears. Distilled to an essence, I'll find place where prayers expand forever, like the air that I breathe. Counting crows. Crows stream overhead near dusk, first in 1s, 2s, and 3s like fragments of the oncoming dark. Soon 10s arc across the dimming sky, then hundreds like a cold black river of birds seemingly driven on God's breath. 3 of us in a supermarket parking lot count thousands, tens of thousands, craning our necks upward in the gray winter gloaming. Quizzical shoppers stare, pushing carts filled with bags of apples, steaks, and frozen pizzas. Flying over the pavement to the far horizon, crows land in tall skeletal trees as thick with scuffling, shuffling, raucous birds as it was with summer leaves. An apartment building of branches safe from elves, warmed by communion. Ancient sages augured the future, received messages by numbers, direction and flight of crows. East prophesied visits by relatives, northwest by strangers, and south presaged storms. West forecast different travel and northeast fires. We too peer ahead on winged silhouettes calling in science, wary that changing roosts and numbers may foretell disease, climate change, and the wages of urban sprawl. We seek omens on a seesaw of hope and doubt. Sumac in winter. Branch-like crazy candelabra supporting crimson flame-shaped fruit staghorn sumac burns for months but is not consumed. Conical bunches of berries make snow whiter, sky richer. On the year's altar sacred to the ceremony of the seasons, there are memorial lights for the last day, birthday candles for the first. Growing at field edges and in waste places, most of us don't notice the ruby glow. Bluebirds, robins, and squirrels know better, plucking at the jeweled lights to keep their own fires burning. And I'll end with this one. Junk drawer. My kitchen drunk more is a grab bag of orphaned odds and ends at the ragged edge of lost and urgently needed. A hungry mouth devouring whatever I absent-mindedly toss inside. It's a jumbled collage of scissors, rubber bands, flashlights, batteries, string, road maps, tape, a hammer and pliers, odd coupons, dull pencils with worn-down erasers, pipe cleaners, leftover screws, and hex nuts from forgotten projects, and curious pieces of hardware seemingly spontaneously generated. Like Mary Poppins' carpet bag, it has endless capacity until it doesn't. Why can't I find the giant paperclips I know are in there? I fret as a tangled miscellany of memories mounts on the counter. Wire I used to fix a clock, a fridge magnet Josh made at camp, a champagne cork from my wedding. A packet of marigold seeds long expired falls to the floor. I pick it up, grab my coat and keys in frustration as I leave to buy a box of paper clips. I reach for the trash, but instead sprinkle the rice-shaped seeds in soil along the driveway. I've nothing to lose. Anybody else?
Thank you, Alice, for sharing your thoughts on David and the collection. My name is Amy Naraki. I knew David very well. I think I did. And it's interesting. Every poem is worth reading and reading aloud and reading again. So there's no, if you feel compelled, don't worry about stepping into something you're not familiar with. There is a trajectory of the book. It is divided into sections, but it's David's love of nature, his concern for this world that has some difficulty getting through, like we all do, as David did, and just a deep compassion for that, and a sense of noticing. That's what David did so brilliantly. That's what we train ourselves to do as poets, and that's what we shared as friends, and just looking at something and sharing it, and that's what a poem is. So I'd like to share a couple with you, and the ones Alice read were ones that I had on my bookmark. I didn't, but just because there's so many that I feel are deep and rich and certainly worth sharing. Light is time. Light is time made visible, sunshine a measure of my days, moons marking months, stars pulsing with years. I crave the now, lean into the future like a headwind, but live in the past's receding light. Daylight is over 8 minutes late from the sun, moonshine just a mirrored shimmer, and 4 long years must pass to feel the freshest starlight fall luminous after dark rain. Time will not be rushed. So I find solace in the cyclical world of days, months and seasons, even as I crave an endless string of years. All is flowing photons, a truth offering barely enough lumens to expose tattered edges of our darkest mysteries. That one struck me as a good place to open with light. I think, as Alice said, there's David had a sense of something, whether it was his back, the global warming, the troubles from the pandemic that were still. He wrote much about that in the collection. But the book is also filled with so much light and hope, and yes, grief. But that is what we have as humans. Maybe not in that order, but I'd like to share Sleeping Giant. Sleeping Giant is in Hamden, as many of you know. So I live in Hamden, and see, shared bookmarks. David will like that. So I wanted to share this one. Though David and I don't think Eric ever walked with him at Sleeping Giant. I know he loved that area. He loved all the forests. He was the poet in residence for the New England Trail, which is the set of blue blaze trails up and down Connecticut into Massachusetts, into the northern states, which, New Hampshire, Vermont. But he was chosen, or he, applied to become the speaker for these forests. And that was a great gift for the Forest and Park Association, but for us as readers. And he chose to chronicle his time as the poet in residence through haibun, which is a type of poetry which incorporates prose and poetry. And those are all archived on the website for the Connecticut Forest and Park Association. I mention that because Sleeping Giant is one of the trails that he walked in his residency and other times. But this, the poem is called Sleeping Giant, a trap rock ridge near home. You were invisible as I watched my step on trippy track rock, climbing along narrow ravines thick with oak and beech, breathing hard as I reached the ridge. Dazzled by valley, city, and water views from your cliff edge, chin and hip and high hip, the notion of chest, arms, and legs seemed an extravagance, a figment of metaphor. Turkey vultures circled on thermals, searching for delicious death, but their grateful flight was all I knew. Driving north from New Haven one afternoon, I saw you, 3 miles from head to foot, lying on your back and fast asleep. The clear outline of your body exposing my Lilliputian myopia, the failed reality of our relationship when the trail brought me close among the hemlocks and hardwoods, and along the jagged, windswept ledges where I imagined I knew you. I now walk quietly, knowing the spirit of Caton drowsed you into deep, stony sleep for rowdy behavior, moving rivers causing floods and gorging yourself on people's oysters. In this moment of soft spring, it's believable as the violent upswelling of molten earth 200 million years ago and the tedious eons of cooling and erosion. You've shown me there is more than one way of looking, that one size never fits all. A century ago, quarrymen exploded your head, crushed stone and carted it away to to build the roads which bring me easily to your colossal presence. My heart knows they stopped for fear blasting would awaken you in anger to uproot trees and rip up soil again, altering the course of waters and the whole country trembling in your laborious rise. Slowly, I climb the muscular, angular slope of your slumbering body. I feel your pine-scented breath as I breathe. Your human shape has kept these woods, left you protector of pileated woodpeckers, salamanders, wood frogs, Christmas fern, foxes, deer, and flowers, from bloodroot in March to September's asters. Rest well. Snooze away as awe and wonder awaken a hiker's ordinary days and keep you alive in a landscape created in our own image. I'll read one more and give some others a chance. This poem is called Carolina Rocker, rocking chair, which he has in his office up in Collinsville, where he lived, and where his widow Mary still lives. It begins with an epigraph. A long period of hospitalization and convalescence following a spinal operation in October 1954 gave me my first opportunity to do the reading and research necessary for this project. And that's John F. Kennedy from Profiles in Courage. Worn down, scolded by a nagging back, I ask what the Carolina Rocker can do for me. Embraced in steam-bent oak and woven rattan, I find the angle of incline and the seesaw swing and sway eases my ache. It's a brisk sit, like walking while seated. I sat at my mom's skirt hem to the thump and hiss of her ironing as Kennedy sparred with Nixon in jittery black and white. A few years later, a shot in Dallas sent me home from school. I saw Oswald murdered live on television, and John saluted a flag-covered casket. I could rock endlessly in a chair that sweetened the president's suffering. Rhythmic motion stirs my memory and legs. Pain fires time's essence, saturates the moment with necessity, just as distance provokes our reach beyond profiles to full-fronted courage.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eric Lehman. I was also good friends with David, and we edited a book together, New England Nature. Did a lot of things together. Last week, Amy and I went up to Walden Pond, so I thought I'd read his poem from Echoes from Walden, which was a collection which they have in the bookstore there, and which you should get your copy here, though, at Byrd's Books,
Yeah.
of course. but I had always wanted to hike there with David, and I never got a chance. So this is his poem from the collection, Echoes from Walden. It's called Vain Strivings Untied. And he has a quote from Thoreau at the beginning: "Be it life or death, we crave only reality." With faith in seeds, you bravely sowed furrows of words for a harvest you'd never see. Now comes a crop of long overdue letters from that distant land of ever-receding futures. Little solitude prevails at Walden, full of summer swimmers and visitors on well-worn paths. Staring into earth's deep-eyed, pilgrims pine for answers where you sunk fathomless questions. I'm one of many dowsers, turning your pages like divining rods, probing veins of truth veiled by rising vapors. Simplicity seems complicated among spinning motors, tract houses, strip malls, and electrical amplification. You could easily put your foot through this contorted world where news is faked, phones smart, and reality virtual. But your voice still whispers in snowstorms, sounds in tumbling streams, screams with the silence of stones. I listen carefully, chancing upon disparate moments of quiet inspiration, to cast a line on my own nearby pond. When we went up there, I mean, if you've been to Walden, it's packed with people, and everyone was in the parking lot, and we're going down towards the beach there. I'm like, oh, this is gonna suck. And we get over to where the boat's going, and we wanted to go up to Emerson's Cliff. I had never actually walked up that hill, and there's a park ranger there, and she's like, can I help you? And I was like, how do we get here? And she's like, oh, take this little path through the woods and fall. And literally, as soon as we stepped off the main path that goes around Walden Pond, nothing. No one. It's totally empty. We went up the cliff. We were the only ones up there. You know, we went through the woods, saw like one other couple. Then we get back to the pond again, and of course there's a million people again. But and then after we saw his house site, we went off the trail again, and immediately nobody. And I just thought it was hilarious that this place, you know, this is the American nonconformist here, right? And like everybody just stays on that one path right around it. Like, oh man. But I mean, I did that one path last time I was there, so I have nothing to speak about, but I thought that was wonderful. So at his house site, there is a huge cairn of rocks. I don't know if you've been there, you've seen it. People just started making this cairn and putting rocks there. So we took a stone from our house and put it there for David. He wrote a poem called Thoreau's Cairn, so I'm going to read that. Thoreau's Cairn. He's less dead than he'd ever imagined. His simple house alchemized to an icon by pilgrims grasping stones from home, speaking languages from around the globe. I longed to hear his voice, imagined it in the wind, but only heard a kingbird's high, querulous cries. Henry was speaking, in the only way he'd want to sound. I placed my stone on the shape-shifting pile of spires, plateaus, and slopes, a jumble of granite, schist, and sandstone, each piece calling in its own tone, cadence, and diction. Let somebody else go now.
Anybody else? Barb isn't here, so that's who was going to read next. And Rick McGee has a migraine.
Please, somebody.
No?
Awesome.
Anita's in my book group and a fan.
I can read some more, but
This just caught my eye when I'm looking at the book. River mussels. The name of a thing may easily be more than the thing itself to me. Henry Thoreau. Heel splitter, tidewater mucket, shiny rayed pocketbook, oval pigtoe, wartyback. Blind, sedentary, and soundless, names of these living rocks are the music of human imagination, spell primal wonder in wild creatures. Pearl shell, dwarf wedge mussel, alewife floater, eastern elliptio,